Greetings and salutations to all of my fellow book-loving friends out there. My name is Jeff Kowalk, and you are watching Erudite Magic. If you've been here before, welcome back. And if you haven't been here before, we're so glad you're here. This channel is all about magic books. I have a question for you today. Where are you on your creative journey? There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a beginner. We've all been there. And when I say beginner, what I'm really saying is someone who sees a magic trick and basically performs it exactly as they saw it or exactly as it was taught to them. Like I said, nothing to be ashamed of. We have all been there. But the subject of today's book is how you can create your own magic. The book we're going to talk about today is going to give you some practical tips on how you can create your own magic. The book I'm talking about this week is by Theron Christensen, and it is called Plotting Astonishment. This is a very accessible book, as you can see by the size, not super thick, easy to read, easy to understand, and more importantly, easy to put into practice. So, who is this Theron Christensen guy? Well, if you're like me, you weren't really familiar with him. What I did find out through a little bit of correspondence and research is that he's actually a lawyer and a part-time professional magician practicing law in Iowa. I want to tell you up front, Theron messaged me and said, "Hey, have you ever seen my book?" which he published here in January of 2020. Theron gifted me this copy so that I could review the work. I assure you it will in no way impact my review, but I wanted you to know that it was a gift. Let's talk about what Theron says in this book. So right off the top, I want to say that Theron has done a great job of researching the material that he's put in this book. You're going to hear from people like Tommy Wonder, you're going to hear from Our Magic, you're going to hear from all of the old greats, Tarbell, etc. So Theron knows what he's talking about, or has certainly researched people who do know what they're talking about. Although he's a relative unknown, the praise for Plotting Astonishment at the beginning has very kind things to say from Martin Lewis, Dan Harlan, and Joshua J. One of the things that I really like about this is the subtitle aspect of this, The Performing Magician's Guide to Creating Original Magic. That's the goal, summed up right there in one sentence about this book. The book is approximately 130 pages and is broken down into 5 different parts. So who's this book for? Well, I think that if you're someone who's kind of in the middle of your learning experience, you've already gotten some basics of the beginner books, you have started to put in the work, maybe watch some DVDs, learn from other magicians, or picked up some books and learned those tricks. You've progressed and maybe you've shown some of those tricks to people, and you're looking to put together a show. A book like this is going to come in handy when you're starting to think about who you are as a performer and as an artist and what you want to convey to your audience. If you're not at that point and all you've ever thought about is method and trick, buying things, that's fine. This probably isn't for you at this point. I alluded to this at the beginning, that magicians walk a certain path and that when you're a beginner, you're not really even thinking about art. Let me analogize this to being a painter. When you're first learning to paint, you're not thinking about what masterwork you can paint. Instead, you're trying to find out how do brushstrokes work and what kind of colors should you use? What kind of paper should you use? Who should you emulate? What kind of art do you even like? The same thing is true in magic. When you're starting out, my advice is you should read, watch, and study broadly. You should take in as much as you can and figure out, what do I like? For me, my personal journey took me from being a close-up card magician to seeing mentalism performed by Richard Osterlin and deciding this is what I want to perform for paying audiences. So how is this book going to help you? It is not going to help you if your goal is to invent tricks to sell to other magicians. Now, it may help you in that way, but that's certainly not the intent, and I don't think you're going to get that kind of value at it. I think the value is in you as a performing artist. So if you perform for audiences, there's a lot in here to like. He talks about the methods deployed by Daryl Fitzkee in The Trick Brain and why that's a great starting point for thinking about how to be creative, but it ultimately falls a little flat because it lacks context and meaning for you and your audience. So what Theron provides is a framework for you to create your own novel and meaningful magic. Meaningful magic both to you as a performing artist and to your audience as a receptive and appreciative crowd. In other words, you need to enjoy the magic, but so do they. So what all is in this? Again, he talks about what is magic, why it's important to create novel magic, methods to go about creating novel magic, ways to think about meaning so that there's meaning for it for you and for your audience. And then the bulk and the meat of the book is giving you 5 different ways that you can think about your own creative magic. And this is the part that gives debate among magicians. Can you teach creativity? Theron is giving you some very practical methods to stimulate your own creative thinking about magic, but you're still going to have to put some work in. He also addresses how much work should you put in. This is a question that I have had before, I've postulated here, and will continue to have a debate, and I'd like to hear your comments down below about how much work is too much work to be practical for you and for an audience. Nate Staniforth talked about this in his Clouds and Kingdoms book, about if you can get 1 more ounce out of an effect with 15% more work, would you do it? It's an open question, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. Theron shares his own viewpoints on that subject, and that things do need to hit a certain balance of practicality. And he has some good examples about why that's true. Some of the tips that he gives you, he talks about building on forgotten effects. So he encourages you, which endears him to me, to go back to the old books, Tarbell, The Jinx, etc., to look for ideas that might have been genius, maybe need some updating with different props or maybe a slightly different method, but meaningful magic that you can find in old books. He talks about building on top of your other interests. So this is an idea espoused by Juan Tamariz that as you study other things, it gives you an opportunity or a breakthrough to see something that maybe you didn't see before. Some of the greatest inventions in mankind have been from someone crossing a line from one industry to another and taking ideas from the one and applying it to the other to create something brand new and innovative. He talks about using interesting objects to come up with interesting magic. Of course, there are some limitations on that, but he gives you some really great ideas on how you might put this kind of work into your magic. In the last section of the book, he gives you 6 examples from his own work of novel pieces of magic that he has created. Now, he's sharing them with you with the understanding that you can perform these if you want, but the real intent in providing them to you is to share the thought process and how he applied exactly what he's teaching you to create something new and original for both him and his audiences. There are some neat effects in there for the parlor performer. None of these are really close-up items, and a number of them will take you quite a bit of work to prepare and perform, but the effects are really great at demonstrating his tips and ideas on how you should be creating novel magic. Now, the book may be brief in size, and I will admit that I got through it really quickly. I think in just a few sittings, I was able to process everything. I took some notes, and honestly, one of the biggest pieces of praise that I can give this book is that I actually wanted to write in it, highlight in it, and dog-ear some pages. I don't say that a lot about books. There were a number of things that I read I really wanted to take a highlight or two. Instead, I ended up writing them down in my journal here. He encourages you to keep a journal of ideas and has some additional thinking. You've heard me encourage you to keep a journal about your reading, about what you're working on, and he gives you some really practical next steps that you can take with that material. And while this book is a book about theory on creativity, he doesn't go over the top with the theory where it just blows your mind. Instead, everything is very understandable and practical. All the ideas in here are simple ideas, but they seem to be very promising and I believe could bear fruit in your own creative work. He also gives you steps to take that once you've come up with an idea, you've worked on it, it's novel to you, it's novel to an audience, it has meaning to it for both you and the audience. How do you go about implementing that into your show? Because you certainly don't want to rush things and put things in that end up making you bomb. Although you're going to have to get yourself outside your comfort zone if you want to create novel and meaningful magic. I'm certainly going to be deploying a number of these ideas in my own magic, going back through my notebooks. I feel like I've already been on part of this journey, and he really helped to just solidify it for me in writing about what I need to do and some practical steps that will take me to the next level. So if that's where you're at, that you're trying to design your act, your show, your character, and you'd like a little more thinking about what would make the magic meaningful and novel to you, I recommend plotting Astonishment. At the end of each major section, he gives you some key concepts that are continued. At the end, you will have a list of things, and I would call these action items or next steps to take to help you in your creative process. So if you follow these steps by answering the questions and writing down the things that he's asking you to do as homework, you're going to make progress, I think, significantly faster in your own creative endeavors. I was pretty impressed with Theron's thinking. It was inspired to the point that I wanted to write down a bunch of ideas, and certainly got my juices flowing when it comes to being creative about my own character. The author self-published this through Amazon.com, so I will certainly drop a link down below so that you can get a copy if it's of interest to you. The one drawback, I guess, about the book is that it is $40, and when you compare this to some of the other books that you can get on the subject of being creative in magic, you're going to certainly get a bigger book, and in most cases by someone who's more well known. A few books by Darwin Ortiz come to mind that would be comparable, or at least push you in a similar direction. Strong Magic by Darwin Ortiz is normally $50. Designing Miracles, also by Darwin Ortiz, is normally $40 or $50, and I think right now it's on sale. Things could change in the future. The Books of Wonder are another reference I would recommend for someone who's looking to become creative or think more about the theory of magic. They don't talk about the same things as plotting Astonishment, but I want you to know about some other resources if you decide to head down this path, what you might want to look for either in future reading or just to supplement a book like Plotting Astonishment. This may or may not be the right starting point for you. I certainly think it has value in your creative journey, but it may be priced slightly high relative to the market of other books about being creative in magic. I hope regardless of the path that you take, whether it's with this book or a different book, I certainly hope that you will find ways to create novel and meaningful magic for both you and your audiences, and that you will share down in the comments below what has helped propel you forward in your creative journey and the resources that you've found helpful. If there are any questions that I can help you answer about this book or about Theron, I'd be happy to put you in contact with him. I certainly hope he'll drop some of his information down below so that you can reach out to him with any questions. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching, subscribing, liking, commenting, everything that you do to help keep me going on this channel. It is much appreciated. As always, my erudite friends, keep reading.